Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Creative Exchange Backstage Sessions. Uh, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you one of the most dynamic people on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. I've been following his career as long as I've been a drummer, and he's a clinician, author. He teaches master classes. We just talked for a second. He just got done teaching a master class this morning to 75 drummers. Um, Author of many, many books. We're going to get into that. And one of the most enthusiastic people I've ever seen. It's infectious. Welcome, Dom Famularo, everybody.
Michael, thank you so much. This is great to see you again, and even though we're connecting via virtually here, but it's great to see you again. And I'm still doing this. I'm having more fun now, in my career on my way down. This is fantastic.
As far as I'm concerned, you're never on your way down. You're always on top, baby.
Thanks.
Let me start by asking. I've watched a lot of your clinics. I've seen you at NAM show several years. We've gotten to touch base a little bit. We have a lot of things in common that we'll get into. But you always start your interviews asking the people that you talk to how they got their start. So I'm going to pose that question to you right off the bat.
Boy, Michael, thank you so much. I really, I come from an Italian family that was a musical family. My uncles played instruments, and my mother sang, and it was just in an Italian family. Every Sunday, the family would get together, cousins and aunts and uncles, and music was a big part. And somebody would be singing. Someone had a guitar. You dance. Who had an accordion? It was just a way of life that's what we entertained ourselves with. So it began there. Then, as we began to be surrounded by music, it was February 9th of 1964 that myself and my brothers and my younger sister, we were watching the Ed Sullivan Show, which was
Wow.
a kind of a variety show on a Sunday night, and the Beatles came on. And when the Beatles came
Wow.
on, Mike, like I'm sure like millions of other people, when we heard that, it was like, what the heck is this? It was so
Right.
exciting, and it was such a great adventure to be a part of this that by the end of that show, my two older brothers played guitar and bass. I grabbed the drums. My younger sister played piano, and we had a band, and we were learning Beatles songs.
Wow.
It started there.
Incredible.
It was such
That's
a fun time,
amazing.
a real fun time. And what was amazing is that the Beatles songs were easy to learn. There were three or
Right.
four chords, so they were easy to learn. So as young kids that were not experienced yet, the beats were simple enough for me to understand. So immediately we started playing songs, and now every Sunday, that band that we had to perform for the relatives that came by. So once a week, we had to practice all week new songs. So we had different songs to play for that following week, and that was the engine of just great fun involved with music.
That's amazing. I can relate to that completely. I grew up in a big Greek family full of musicians.
Same thing.
Uh, I used to set up my drums, and me and my friends would play for my mom in the living room, full blast, with her sitting like 6 feet away. They always supported us playing. It was awesome.
Well, I've got some Greek blood in me too. And in my last trip that I took my family to, we went to Athens and met some dear friends of mine, my Greek friends, and we had a great time. And it was so common on how the Italians and Greeks and families like that get together, and music is a part of it. So it's just a wonderful
Sure.
beginning.
Music's always a part of it. Good food, lots of love. And
Absolutely.
that all ties in together because your mantra, one of your favorite sayings is to have freedom when you play and to play naturally and to give it everything that you have. And I'm the same way when I play. I play every show like it's my last, and so I love that about you. You have a saying I just wanted to mention real quick. Um, that let me find it here. It's to dream is innovation, and innovation is just a quote for me.
To dream. I mean, think about that. To dream and have the ability to have the vision of something greater.
Yeah.
That really is something where once the clarity of that dream comes in, we then begin to we're almost kind of forced to create and innovate ways to achieve that dream. And that's always been a part of my life, where we were kind of like supported to follow that dream. Freedom is what we strive for in every day of our life. Countries are still striving for higher levels of freedom. Even though in America, where our Constitution talks about freedom, we still have challenges understanding what freedom means even in America. So worldwide, freedom is still kind of growing and developing. Well, individually, if I can take my individual dream and I can begin to envision something and take that to reality. For me, as a young child playing drums, I was having so much fun. Here I am playing drums, and people are dancing and applauding, and I'm seeing that my skill is bringing joy to people. What a high that is!
Right.
That my effort can bring joy to other people, and they applaud and they're thankful for our talent. This was, I got sucked into this at an early age and realized that we are supposed to dream and we are supposed to work towards that dream.
Yes. I remember the quote now. To dream breeds innovation, and innovation creates a better world.
There it is. There it is. Yes.
That's one of the quotes. You have a lot of them. It's
I
incredible.
in my book, I have a book that I wrote, and I've got over 500 quotes in there that I've come up. And a lot of my quotes came up from just my travels as I began to travel around the world, doing these different lectures and performances. If you keep an open mind, you'll learn. And if you learn, it inspires you. And if you're inspired, that can take you to new heights of expression.
Absolutely. You've traveled to over 40 countries and done master classes and clinics for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
Do you ever get tired of that? Do you ever just say, you know what, I want to take a break? Or is it always exciting to go out and meet new people and share your gift?
Interesting question, Michael. First of all, I think now I'm over 60 countries that I've traveled to.
Wow.
When I look at my map, I put magnets on my map, so I've got a map on my wall here that allows me to kind of see it. Traveling for me is the best teacher. It's the best way to learn about people, cultures, dreams, realities, freedom. All of this is in the world for us to learn from. And if we become a sponge to knowledge, all those answers to some of the greatest challenges will be solved. So to me, the traveling was intense. I mean, I'm a 2 million mile flyer on Delta Airlines.
Wow.
It was insane. I was doing 10 to 15 countries a year, many of them more than once. So it was intense.
Right.
When the pandemic hit, I just stayed in my studio and began to teach the world this way. So I have not traveled anywhere in a little over a year. And I've kind of enjoyed that I'm not driving to the airport. I'm not taking a long flight across the sea. I'm not dealing with time zone changes. And I'm sleeping in my own bed at night. Michael, can you imagine?
Right.
I'm sleeping in my own bed every night.
I know exactly what that's like because I've been with Walter Trout for 14 years. We do about 270 shows a year. So I've done about 3,000 shows with him, traveled all over the world. And there's nothing like coming home and sleeping in your own bed. I love traveling, being able to be people happy doing what we love to do. But there's nothing like coming home and sleeping in your own bed. I agree.
And I'll tell you, teaching this way now, virtually in this light, has been absolutely tremendous because I'm still able to travel. As I said, today alone, I taught, 5, 6, 7 countries in one day alone, and every day it's like that. So I'm traveling around the world virtually, still experiencing these countries through these students' eyes, and it's still pretty powerful to be able to have that level of communication.
Absolutely. You were one of the first teachers to do online teaching.
I did. I think I was the first because when Skype first started, that was the first, video conferencing program. And I joined Skype. I think I was like one of the first few 100 that joined Skype when it first started.
Wow.
And you had to sign up in it. And when you signed up on Skype, it told you how many people were on. So, I got on there where it was like just a few hundred on there. And I joined it and filled out the documents of what I had to do online and everything. And that's when it was dial-up, Michael. When it was really a much slower hookup.
Sure. AOL.
It really was, and an AOL account that was an AOL at the time was the program to use, and Skype was there. So I started teaching, and someone at Skype had contacted me after I started doing some lessons with students. They contacted me and they emailed me, "Hello, I'm a manager from Skype. What are you doing?" So I emailed them back and said, "Well, I'm teaching, private drum lessons to students around the world using Skype as my medium to reach these people."
Mhm.
So they were blown away by that. So they said, "Well, what do you think you need? How can we make it better?" And that's when I hit them with higher level of internet, connection,
All right.
more powerful modems. We had to use a separate modem outside the computer in those days. So you had to plug the phone line into a modem and then the modem into your computer. It was a very, very different process. With that, I
Yeah.
started having a better sound system, being able to see everyone better. So they started making improvements for everyone. More people started signing up on Skype. And then in time, when Skype became fantastic, other companies like Zoom came out. And when Zoom came out, they seemed to have kind of heightened their machine to a much higher level. So I started using Zoom. And with this, I was doing this for 20 plus years. So when the pandemic hit, it didn't affect me. If anything, I'm busier now than when I was traveling around the world.
Exactly. You've used it to your advantage, and that's an amazing thing. And I'm so glad that you can reach so many people that way, and that we have the technology that we have now. It's a bit of a learning curve for people who aren't used to it, but you were already on that path, so it probably wasn't much of a
It really
diversion for
was.
you.
And what I did was I just upgraded my monitor, I upgraded my cameras, I upgraded my sound system. I had all that stuff kind of happening. And I've got a student of mine, Jim Toscano, who's a phenomenal drummer and teacher, but is also a technologist where he understands all of this gear. So
Right.
when Jim was taking some lessons with me, he came to my studio and saw what I was doing. He said, "Wow, I see what you're doing." So he began to do it, and then with his technologies background, went to the next level and started learning all about the different cameras and audio interfaces. So Jim has been very, very helpful for me here to even upgrade what I'm doing here. And this, I've got 4 cameras here, and from my studio, Michael, I'll show you. I can come back to my drum set here, and
Right.
this is so camera 1 I have on my practice pad, so I can
Nice.
do some pad stuff. Camera 2, I come here,
Oh, that's awesome.
so I can have
I saw you do an interview with Mike Mangini, and he had the same thing. He had all the overhead angle, front angle, side angle. It's amazing.
how great is this, right? So this side shot, and plus I've got picture in picture, so I can remove that. As you can see, I've got a chart. I'm working on a 7-page chart that I'm practicing. So
Wow.
I taped it to my boom stands and my overheads so I can have the chart in front of me so I can work on the chart
Old
the way
school,
it is.
man.
It really is old school. And I have picture in picture so I can have my feet in the picture
Pedal.
here. So I can play here.
Incredible.
And
You
have that
know,
ability. Then I have this. I can go here if I want to focus on my feet and talk about.
oh yeah. Up close.
I've got a camera for my feet, and then I've got this shot here, so I can do an overhead shot and have that overhead
Wow.
shot with picture in picture or without picture in picture. I've got the ability of being able to have this so people can see my full setup, and
Right.
it just kind of works out real well that in this process of being able to communicate this way by having my studio built where I have access to my full kit here. As you can see, I've got a monitor behind me. So I've got you, Michael, on my monitor back up in here. So when I'm sitting
Right.
at my drum set, I can look at that monitor, have my drum set here. And I've had this set up for years. And just
Wow.
in time, as the
That's
technology gets
amazing.
better, yeah, I just upgrade to newer cameras. I've got all Zoom cameras here, the 4K Zoom cameras. And it allows me to
Yeah.
have accessibility to the world.
Incredible. I'm a Vader artist. You're a Vader artist. I love the path that you've got there. I want to talk a little bit about the drum teacher lineage that you are. So you have a rich history of knowledge about going back to the teachers that you study with, the legends, Jim Chapin, Joel Morello, Shelly Manne.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I had Let There Be Drums growing up. I had my parents' record player collection. That's how I started. Gene Krupa was my getting into drums at 6. My mom used to go see Benny Goodman at the Palladium, and she
Yeah.
played the record, and I just went nuts, man. And that was it. I was hooked. I got bit by the bug.
That
So
is so exciting.
we have some things in common. Can you do a quick synopsis of the three main grips that you learned from your legendary teachers and who they learned from while you're
Absolutely.
at the pad?
Absolutely. You know, I tell people if they want to go to my website, domfamularo.com, on my website in the menu, there's a menu that says free downloads. If they go to the
Right.
free downloads, they can download this document, which is a graph of my drum teacher lineage, which shows the teachers Sanford Moeller, George Lawrence Stone, and Billy Gladstone. Those are
Right.
the three names that Max Roach, God, Max Roach, what a great player he was. I met Max Roach when I was 18 years old in 1971. And
Right.
I heard him perform, and he played like just so great, and it was fluid and relaxed, and every solo he played in each set was different. It was creative. It just blew me away. I went up to him afterwards when he was packing up his drums in this little club in New York City. I said, Mr. Roach, I just want to shake your hand. That was just so inspiring. And I asked him, how do you learn to have that level of freedom? You just think of an idea and you can play it. Anywhere you go, you're able to move. How do you develop that level of freedom? And he looked over at me and he held his fingers up and he said, Billy Gladstone, George Lawrence Stone, Sanford Moeller. He mentions three names. I kind of knew the names, but I mean, I said, wow. He said, those are the teachers that teach the techniques of the finger movement from Gladstone, the wrist movement for George Lawrence Stone, and the whip motion for Sanford Moeller. He said, when you get those down, those are the tools to allow you to have that freedom of expression. And then listening to a variety of drummers and music and playing with bands, you're going to put this all together. So basically, he gave me a university curriculum in that conversation. Then I said, wow, I want to learn from Billy Gladstone, George Lawrence Stone, and Sanford Moeller. And here it is, 1971. And Max said to me, too late. They're dead.
Right. So you sought out their students.
My next question was the question that Max Roach said impressed him so much. I said, well, Mr. Roach, if they're gone, who were their best students? He saw that I was determined to learn this. He said, that's the right question. You got to find Shelly Manne, who was the best student, and Ted Reed under Billy Gladstone. You got to find Joe Morello, the best student under George Lawrence Stone, and you got to track down Jim Chapin, the best student under Sanford Moeller. That's where I went. I went to Morello first, and once I understood from Morello kind of opened me up with this George Lawrence Stone free stroke, which was this rebound stroke, throw it down and let the stick bounce back up. The freedom of being able to play and let that stick bounce was like dribbling a basketball. What an incredible excitement to free my hands up. Then he passes me after many years to Jim Chapin. Now I learn Moeller. Moeller is a whip with the free stroke.
Right.
All of a sudden now I'm starting to get this happening and I'm feeling even better. Then I tracked down Shelly Manne, who at that time lived in California. So I was living in New York. I live on Long Island. Joe Morello was in New Jersey. Jim Chapin was here on Long Island. That's easy to connect with them.
Sure.
When they said you're ready for Shelly Manne, I hopped in a van with a couple of other musicians and put a band together and drove 3,000 miles to California to take lessons with Shelly Manne.
Talk about dedication, man.
Everyone thought I was crazy. And I said, listen, if I'm crazy and I'm having this much fun, I can't wait till I go insane.
Well, you mentioned that the path of most resistance is the way that you'll go because you learn more. So that's a perfect example of that.
Boy, Michael, that's exactly it. I knew that if I wanted to seek out someone like Shelly Manne, because that was the ingredient. He was the best student under Billy Gladstone. And Billy Gladstone understood this finger motion.
Which is based on the French grip, correct?
In French grip, correct. So what I had to learn from Morello, Chapin, and Shelly were the three different hand positions, which was Germanic position, which was here, where your elbows are relaxed and you're in a 90-degree angle, and I'm here. And from that stroke, when I'm playing the free stroke, is a wide, full stroke in Germanic position. The next position was French grip. Well, French grip came in this position where the sticks are parallel. So now I hold the stick in my hand the same way, but I throw the stick down and let that stick bounce back up in that French position. Again,
Right.
still playing the free stroke, but letting the stick bounce up in French grip. And French grip, you have the accessibility of being able to play from your wrist. So I'm here on my wrist, a la Cobham and Simon
Sure.
Phillips players, or you can play from your fingers
Fingers.
in here. So French grips, you've got a couple of options. So I was playing traditional grip at the time. I played that way, so that was the fourth version. But in 2002, I made the change to all match grip, and I made the
Right.
change to open-handed playing.
Yes, you wrote a book on open-handed playing. It's fascinating.
It's Klaus Hessler, who was a student of mine, who has taken it to such a high level of playing open-handed. He's just a brilliant drummer from Germany, and Klaus, Klaus, KlausHessler.com. I tell everyone, go there and check out what he does. Brilliant player. The book is called Open-Handed Playing. We have a volume 1 and a volume 2,
Yeah.
and it kind of opens up with the concept of thinking about using your weaker hand, which is why on my drum set I've got 2 ride cymbals.
Right.
And I've got 2 hi-hats. So I'm
Yep.
playing right-hand lead or left-hand lead, right-hand ride, left-hand ride. This, to me, is where the magic begins.
And that creates a whole musical, like a like notes, because you have a 14-inch set and a 15-inch set, so they have different tones. You have 2 17-inch cymbals, but they have different pitches so that you can create music, not just hit the drums.
Absolutely. Walter, this is about looking at, when someone says to me, you have too many cymbals, I say, well, a piano has 88 keys. Are there too many keys? No. That's a part of the expression of the range of sounds that we're looking for. So I've got
Right.
my 10 and 12-inch splash here. I'll show you over here. I've got my 10. I've got a 10-inch splash here and a 12-inch splash here. I've got my 2 17-inch crashes in front of me. I've got 2 ride cymbals. I've got a Dave Weckl Evolution ride cymbal to my right and my Sabian HHX stage ride to my left. I've got
Awesome.
2 hi-hats, 14-inch hats and 15-inch hats, and an 18-inch China cymbal and a 20-inch China cymbal. So
Awesome.
this range
That's amazing. And you also have your drums set up offset rather than 10, 12, 14, 16. Does that give you more creativity and things can sound different?
Great question, Michael. It sure does. And the first person that I saw do that was Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham arranges his toms, larger tom to smaller tom, and musically it challenges you. So I put my 12-inch here, my 10-inch next, my 16-inch here, and my 14 back here. And I tune them in fourths. So if I play it up this way,
So just going up and down the drums changes your concept of what you're hearing come out of the drums, because you would hear it go ding, 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 but it's completely different. It sounds awesome.
it makes me think, but it also, I have my 12-inch tom and my 14-inch tom in the positions of when I was a young kid. I played a 4-piece kit.
Yep.
So here's
what I play.
This is it.
Sure.
So I still have my 4-piece kit inside of my bigger kit, so I can have the options of really understanding how to hear and listen and create and challenge myself, which is something which I really kind of enjoy about music, to constantly challenge ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm a left-handed player, and I taught myself in a garage, just, would drag my mom's record player, the big console, into the garage, and I'd just lock myself in there, and I would just practice for hours and hours, for months and years, and try and learn Neil Peart's licks on Rush and Led Zeppelin and all this great stuff that I had to pull from, because we're all just thieves, right? We all just steal
Oh,
everybody else's stuff, and
exactly.
eventually you create your own voice, which is what I love that you say about someone, is that the best thing that you can do is to enjoy yourself and find your own voice as a drummer. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's so true. But the open-handed thing, when I would sit in on other people's drums, they're like, you can play, but you can't touch nothing. So I had to sit down and twist my left foot around and play caca and open my hands. But when I played open-handed, I had this freedom to move my other hand around.
Yeah.
So it's taught me, so open-handed playing. You wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
But that's great, Michael, to have that ability of being able to understand the challenges that we look at on our instrument, and that we can, with the drum set, you really can put the drums wherever you want. The piano
Right.
is designed the way it is. Guitar, hey, listen, some guitar players change their strings. They start to expand where the guitar is at. Some bass players now are playing 5, 6, 7 strings.
Right.
It's opened up, so the instruments are expanding, and drums also are expanding that way. So to me, the influence of being able to play, as you said, first of all, it starts with imitation. Imitation, we imitate our great players. From imitation, if we learn the patterns that they're playing and the concepts that they're playing, we then bring that into what I call assimilation. We bring that into our system and we assimilate it into our system, so now it becomes a part of us. The next journey is that of innovation. So if I go from imitation to assimilation to innovation, that's where we find our own personal voice.
That's beautiful.
And when you mention someone like open-handed playing, I've got to go back and talk about the great Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham was the visionary of this kind of playing, and I just actually spoke to Billy this morning on a Zoom call. Billy lives in Switzerland, and we've got a master class that we're doing. Actually, this Sunday, we're doing one a month for the next 9 months.
Incredible.
So we're doing one every month. We do one on this coming Sunday for 3 hours, and it's myself and Billy Cobham will be involved in every one of the classes. And we're bringing guests in, and several of the guests are Dennis Chambers, Gary Husbands, and Will Calhoun.
Wow.
So as we bring them in,
what a lineup.
This is so fantastic. So we're going to start that this Sunday from 12 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. And we've got many students signing up. And I tell everybody, if they're interested and they want to sign up to any one of these classes, go to the website Stages Music Arts. Stages is plural, music is singular, and arts is plural. StagesMusicArts.com. Go there. You'll see all the information there. You can sign up for any one of the classes. And it's exciting to have someone like Billy Cobham, this great master, who is 75 years young.
Incredible.
And still playing at the top of his game.
Right.
Listen, I'm going to be 68 the end of August.
68 years young. That's right.
68 years young. I'm still pushing this hard. I'm at the cutting edge. And like I say, I feel like I'm starting to really understand music to a whole nother level after 55 years of playing professionally. So someone like Cobham, who's been doing it as long as he's doing it, Billy and I are dear friends. We met over 50 years ago, and we've done many clinics together. When I first joined Tama Drums at the time, I had joined them. They put me on tour with Billy Cobham doing some clinics. Our first clinic tour was 27 cities in 28 days.
Wow.
This was baptism by fire, I'll tell you. It was just absolutely fantastic. And Billy is just such a great, great person. So Billy was the one that had the idea of this concept. Now, Billy is a natural right-handed person. He writes with his right hand. He throws with his right hand. But when he set up the drum set, when they made him cross his hands, when this concept happened, Billy started to, click his sticks and realize he was struggling to a certain degree because it wasn't comfortable, and his left hand was restricted underneath his playing. Now, the concept of teaching this cross-handed playing, back in 1938, a book was written by Gene Krupa. And I'm going to show you something here. Boy, I normally don't do this here, but I think this will be great to show you this here.
And just to point out while you're getting that out, Gene Krupa was not only one of the first people to do the first drum solo, but he was one of the first people to do a clinic. Is that right?
Absolutely correct. And that's where we get into hand technique, for example. Like the techniques that were taught years ago, it's because of Gene that we have the American grip. This was extremely important. The German grip, in German they play this way in Germany because they in this position you're using all of your muscles available, and the Germans wanted a powerful sound. So they played their drums in this position.
Right.
French were playing more delicate music. They wanted a softer playing, so they played in French grip in here. So French grip was for a lighter way of playing. Germanic was much for a more powerful way of playing. Well, Gene Krupa used to play. He played traditional grip, and he played on his snare drum. And he was doing one of his first clinics, and questions were asked. They said, boy, Mr. Krupa, your left hand is in a great traditional grip, the parade hold, but your right hand, is that German or is that French grip? And this was around the 1940s during World War II. So Gene kind of looked down and said, well, German grip would be out to here. French grip would be in here. Where I am, this is the American grip. It's between the French and Germans.
You just made it up right there.
Right? And you just happen to say that. That's the American grip.
Awesome.
Here we are in World War II. The Americans came in between the French and Germans, and Gene
That's
just
right.
happened to use that comment. And when he said that, it was kind of like in between. It wasn't total Germanic, and it wasn't French. So he called it the American grip. Well, it stuck. So when I
Amazing.
went to learn from Joe Morello, Joe was a dear, dear friend of Gene Krupa, and it was just Gene was just a wonderful soul from what I heard from people that had met him. Although I never met Gene, I did talk to him for a few minutes on the telephone in a lesson that I had with Joe Morello.
Wow.
1972.
Incredible.
It was incredible. During my lesson with Joe Morello, the phone rings, and the person at the time brought the phone into Joe's room, and there was a long telephone cord that he came in, and Joe took the call, and as he's talking to him, he said, yeah, I'm in the middle of a lesson right now. So he said, oh, yeah, you want to talk to me? Hang on 1 second. So he hands the phone that he's talking to me. So I'm in my lesson. I'm kind of shocked.
Wow.
So I said, Joe, who is this? And Morello goes, it's Gene Krupa. I hold the phone to him. I said, hello? He said, hello. He said, this is Gene Krupa. What's your name? And I'm stammering. I'm going, Mr. Krupa, my name is Dom Famularo. I'm a drummer from Long Island. I'm taking lessons with Joe Morello. He goes, well, you are with one of the top educators in the world. I want you to listen to every word that he says, and I want you to be the next generation that keeps this art form alive. That's what he tells me.
Wow.
I said,
Life-changing.
thank you so much. I give the phone back to Morello, and Joe says, I'll call you after my lesson. That lesson was powerful because I could hear his voice was just so calming. And it was a year later in 1973 that he passed away. Now, Gene passed away. He was 64 years old. Let me tell you something. That's young.
Yeah.
For what he did in his lifetime to pave the way of drumming, and then to be the first one to write a drum book like this here in 1938. This was just a couple of years after Stick Control was written in 1935. Wow. Gene wrote this book and put this together, and Gene was an incredible educator. He was a student of Sanford Moeller. And he was
really? I didn't know that.
Absolutely. And he was a student of George Lawrence Stone and a student of Billy Gladstone. So I go back to those three main teachers again that taught everybody. Gene
he did the same thing you did.
It was incredible. He found the originals in what it was,
right.
which is amazing what it was. So, but he learned those techniques, which is what I wanted to learn. And Gene was a student of Sanford Moeller. As the story goes, Gene was performing in 1938 at a club in New York City. And Jim Chapin was just 18 years old, and he went to hear Gene play. And he was blown away by Gene's playing and the music. So after it was over, Jim Chapin walked up to Gene Krupa and said, Mr. Krupa, I want to play the drums for the rest of my life, and I want you to be my teacher. So Gene says, well, he says, that's very, very kind of you. That's a very, very nice compliment, but I'm really busy performing, all around the world. He said, I cannot teach, but I'll give you the name of my teacher. So Gene takes out a piece of paper and writes that on there, Sanford Augustus Moeller, with his phone number. Moeller lived in Queens, Long Island. Jim Chapin also happened to live in Queens, Long Island. Gene lived in Yonkers, New York, not that far from Queens. And Gene, of course, was traveling the world performing and doing all these different movies and performances. You know, Gene was huge. So Jim calls up Moeller, takes some lessons with Moeller, and within a couple of years becomes Moeller's top student. Jim learns the technique and gets his hands together and goes on to perform. And then Jim eventually started performing with Woody Herman and different bands and Casa Loma and all these different bands. So Jim develops his career. Then in 1948, 10 years later, Jim writes this book, Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, which revolutionized modern drumming.
Yep.
All
Standard in the industry.
all the players wanted to learn that book. So that book helped out opening up the minds of many, many drummers. So eventually back in 1950s, as the story goes, Gene Krupa wanted to come back and take lessons with Sanford Moeller to upgrade his technique. So Gene calls up Moeller and says, I want to take some lessons and come back and study with you. And Moeller says, well, I'm retired. I'm not teaching anymore. If you want to learn my technique, you got to call up Jim Chapin. This is huge.
Awesome. Full circle.
Gene calls up Jim. So I said, Jim, what happened when Gene Krupa called you up? He said, when he called me up and said, this is Gene Krupa, I want lessons, I hung up on him. I said, why'd you hang up? He said, it was obviously a prank call. Someone was teasing me. I said, so what happened? He said, well, the phone rang immediately back again. And when I picked up the phone, he said, please don't hang up. I got your number from Sanford Moeller. This is Gene. I want to come back and refresh my hands up on some lessons. So Gene came back to lessons to Jim Chapin back in the 1950s. So the cycle was complete.
Incredible.
But this also states back that Gene was still a student of the art form. Even later on, he still wanted to learn. So Gene writes his book. He writes his book, the Gene Krupa book. I purchased this book because historically, to me, it's very important to have. But I'm going to show you a picture, Michael. A picture that Gene has in his book here. It's got two photos here. I'm going to show you the first photo here. You see what that says? Recommended for soft playing.
Right.
Notice his right hand is on top of his left hand. That's for soft playing.
Right.
In this book, it has this now. Look what this says.
Right. Recommended for loud playing.
For loud playing. And notice his right hand is under his left hand.
Wow.
This was how they taught back in 1938 because at that time, Jim had taught Krupa. Krupa was a student of Moeller. Moeller was this big arc stroke.
Right.
So when they played soft, they played here. When they did a bigger backbeat, they had to put their hand underneath and play here, so they had the movement of Moeller to play the backbeat. So that's how they taught back in 1938. So Gene was innovative at that time and then eventually changed as times had changed to learn how to play more of those strokes. Amazing.
Didn't Jim Chapin lower that so that you could get the most out of just the whipping motion and took it from Moeller then just dropped it down?
That's exactly what he did, Michael. Great point. Jim took it from here, way up here, and brought it down to here.
Right.
So as he showed Gene that, Gene was able to get power from that lower Moeller stroke when he was playing to get the sound he wanted. So Jim kind of helped evolve the technique, and Gene was still the active student to want to learn it. This is the best. That's the best part of the story, is that these guys were constant learners. They were continually learning the craft right up until they died.
That's something I've heard you say many times in many interviews as well, that you're constantly learning. When you think you've got everything down, you've stopped learning.
Boy, there's an excitement to that. I mean, I've got thousands of drum books that I collect, and I go through each of them. I'm constantly going through them and learning and experimenting and pulling ideas. And if I spend $20 on a drum book and I get one idea, that's the best $20 that I spent.
That's right.
I tell people, drum books, that's the knowledge. You know, when you go into a lawyer or a solicitor's office, when you walk into a lawyer's office, the first thing you see is every wall there's books.
Right.
Books everywhere. The process is to acquire this knowledge and take it in. And now with the internet and the fact that we can purchase books digitally, I've got 500 drum books on my phone alone.
Incredible.
It really
at
is.
our fingertips. Yeah.
The time that we live now, Michael, is so much different than how it was when we were younger.
And that's why kids that are so young are so good because they have YouTube. They can get instant, access to things. Not like we had in the old days. You had to go to a drum teacher. I took a couple lessons with Freddie Gruber back in the day when he was in the Valley, and I know he was a good friend of yours,
Yeah,
and he's incredible because he has that whole approach to drumming like you have, where you're dancing, But kids today can just go and pick up, Thomas Lang or whatever, and Benny Colaiuta, and learn all that stuff. It's incredible.
absolutely. It's literally at their fingertip, at their keyboard. And Freddie Gruber, believe it or not, was a student of Jim Chapin and Joe Morello. That's how Freddie learned it, and he learned it back in the 60s and 70s. So
Yeah,
Freddie learned the techniques of this free stroke and this molar and Gladstone and these positions of Germanic position to American positions at a 45-degree angle.
right.
French is parallel. So 90-degree angle for German, American, and French. Those movements, when I'm on the drum set, I might be playing French grip on my ride cymbal, and I might be playing German on my snare. Now,
Right.
I'm not thinking of that when I'm playing, but if I go to analyze it afterwards, that's what's happening. So the more we understand these movements and positions, the more we have the flexibility and the freedom to get around the drum kit to express what we feel.
Great. Well, I know that when you teach your students, you have them work on those specific techniques of those hand motions and those grips, and then you say learn those so that you can develop the muscles in the hand and the arm, and then when you go to play, just don't think about it, and it'll automatically be there from muscle memory.
Absolutely. You know, the great Charlie Parker, in several of the books that I read, always used to say he would go and practice every day. He would learn scales, that he would just practice technique, and he would just practice every day. And then as soon as he put one foot on the bandstand, he forgot it all. He didn't think about it. So we have to kind of ingrain these techniques and these movements and these concepts into our system. That's what practicing does. And then when you go to perform, just open up your heart and just play. If those
Right.
techniques are learned properly, they will assist you in delivering your expression.
That's right. Amazing. I wanted to talk to you about your organization, Wisdom Drum Shed School, that you started, and you have several schools all over the world.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I have a studio that I built here at my home, which is the 24 by 22 foot room. It's on the back property of where I live, so I'm like 50 yards away from my house. And I built the studio, and I call it the Wisdom Drum Shed only because WYZ was years ago my friends used to call me a wizard. So
Right.
WYZ was always in my other wizard.
Well, you are.
Well, I don't know that, but I mean the point. And then my name Dom, so Wisdom was was what I was called as a nickname. So
Right.
that Wisdom Drum Shed kind of applied to what I have here. And I built the studio, and I've got different teaching ways that I teach. Where I've got two drum kits in here for the drum set station. I've got a practice pad for the practice pad station for technique with a double pedal here that I can have a double pedal for my
Right.
bass drum pad here. And I've got a couple of snare drums, a marching snare drum and a contra snare drum that I work on the reading station. So this is station number 1, the technique station. Station number 2, the reading station. And station number 3, the drum sets. So that's kind of when a student comes to me, we kind of work in those different stations and develop the skills that they're looking for and that we want to learn. So many of my students that have come to me have traveled around the world, have come to take lessons with me, and they've acquired these techniques. And one of the students, Massimo Russo, lives in the southern part of Italy. And he said, Dom, I'd like to put a school together like that. So I said, well, let's put it together and we'll map it out. So I kind of taught him the curriculum and that maps out the school. So it's a Wisdom Drum Shed in Vibo, Valencia, Italy, which is in Calabria, the southern part of Italy. And
Wow.
Massimo's got hundreds of students, and I've got a few of these schools popped all around the world. And what it is, they're all dedicated students of mine that learn the techniques, and they've come down the lineage. So the lineage
Right.
was important. So the lineage was, again, Gladstone, Stone, and Moeller. I then studied with their best students on this row here, and that led me to down here. So I kind of pulled all those techniques that I learned from those teachers. And I know many students that study with only Morello or only Jim Chapin, or maybe
Right.
there's a couple lessons with only Shelley, or maybe 2 of those. But I don't know many drummers that study with all 3 of them. And that was
Sure.
a pretty important task of mine when I was younger. I wanted to get that understanding of what, Morello learned from Stone, from the book Stick Control and Accents and Rebounds. He really kind of understood this technique of this free stroke so well, and Morello's playing is just absolutely flawless and beautiful. Chapin,
Absolutely.
Chapin being the best student under Sanford Moeller, I mean, Chapin continued on for years, just to teach in Moeller's technique, and passed on through me in the process, and it was just so great to have that understanding of this movement. And then when I went out to Shelly Manne, it was kind of interesting. Shelly Manne's father was a percussionist who played mallets and timpani in the New York Philharmonic Band and also in the television studios that they had back years ago. And he played mallets and percussion, and Billy Gladstone was the snare drummer. So Shelly Manne's father worked closely with Billy Gladstone for many decades. So when Shelly Manne was a young kid and he wanted to learn drums, Shelly Manne's father said, "You're going to learn from one guy. You're going to learn from Billy Gladstone." So Shelly Manne, as a young kid, went to Gladstone and really learned these techniques well while he was here in New York. Then as Shelly's career grew, he became a phenomenal jazz player and started working with Stan Kenton and doing all these great, great things. Shelly moved out to California because that's where a lot of the work was starting to happen now in the movie industry and the West Coast cool jazz. So Shelly moved out
Right.
to the West Coast and went out there and just became the legend that he remains to be today. And it was just so great. And Shelly Manne, my first lesson with him, he had me do a couple exercises, and he was telling me the story in the movie, the Gene Krupa story. Now, if anybody hasn't seen that movie, you can probably watch the whole movie on YouTube, but you can track it
It's
down.
Sal Mineo, right?
Sal Mineo portrayed Gene Krupa in the movie.
Right.
Now, imagine Hollywood putting out a movie about a drummer. Oh my gosh, that's huge. So I watched the movie several times when I was younger, and in there,
Incredible
Gene
story.
Krupa was good friends with the drummer Davy Tuff. Davy Tuff was a young swing drummer. Well, in the movie, the Gene Krupa story, the role of Davy Tuff is played by Shelly Manne.
Wow.
So Shelly Manne, I'm in a lesson with Shelly Manne practicing some exercises, and he's telling me what it was like to work with Gene Krupa in the movie, the Gene Krupa story with Sal Mineo. Gene Krupa coached Sal Mineo for the drumming. It's an unbelievable movie about a drummer that started the evolution of the creation of our art form as we know it today.
That's fantastic. Another amazing story. You're just chock full of stories. Didn't Shelly Manne give you that finger exercise to do that
This was
killed you?
our first lesson, Mike. I go into the lesson, and here I'm now meeting Shelly Manne. And when I walked into Shelly's lesson, I had just arrived that morning into California with driving with the car. We stopped.
Right.
We got a hotel. Actually, it was a little motel. I got with the two other musicians I was with, and I had this lesson scheduled with Shelly Manne that I had called him up to schedule. So I met him at a school called the Dick Grove Workshop, which was a school
Oh yeah.
in Hollywood, and it was across the street from the Sportsman's Lodge, which is where the
Right.
station was. So I hop in my van, I drop the musicians off at the place, and I get in the car and I go right to my first lesson with Shelly Manne. So I sit down with Shelly, and Shelly says, "Boy, Dom, I know you had called up and scheduled this lesson." He said, "Where are you from?" So I said, "Long Island." He said, "Long Island? And you're way out here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "How long you been in California?" I looked at my watch and I said, "About 4 hours." He said, "What do you mean 4 hours?" I said, "I just drove here and got here this morning." I said, "I dropped my other friends off at a motel and I came here for my lesson with you." He said, "Well, what are you doing out here, Nelly? You have a band? You have any work out here?" I said, "Shelly, I came out here to study with you. I'm here for this lesson. I'll figure out the band gig later on when I get back to the guy.
Wow.
We'll audition and we'll see if we can get a gig out here, but I came out here to study with you." He said, "You drove 3,000 miles to study with me?" I said, "Shelly, I would have drove 6,000 miles to study with you." I said, "I was told I got to stay with you from Joe Morello and Jim Chapin. And for the techniques that I learned," so he knew right away. He goes, "So you understand the free stroke and molar?" I said, "Yeah." He knew right away. He said, "Great. I'm going to give you an exercise that Billy Gladstone gave me." He held his hands like this here and stretched his hands all the way down. He said, "It's not a curl. It's a stretch all the way down." I want you to play this. So here I am holding my fingers. He said, and I don't want you to squeeze your index and thumb. Just relax them and move those 3 fingers. Start doing that. So he puts a metronome on like 140. And here I'm going 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And I'm doing this. And he goes, okay, now while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a little story. And he starts telling me the story about the Gene Krupa movie. So I am mesmerized hearing this story. Shelley, man, my God, Gene Krupa, it doesn't get any deeper than that in the process, you know. So here it is, 1976, Gene had already passed away, and I'm doing this exercise while Shelley's telling the story. Well, he told the story for 1 hour.
Oh,
Michael, I was numb, I was tearing, I was, you know, fogging out. I was like in need of oxygen. It was like I felt like I needed an oxygen tent. And I'm doing this. But after about 15, 20 minutes, it felt great.
right.
I'm doing this. He's telling a story. We finish the lesson. I grab the sticks. He says, show me some finger movement. And I start doing this.
Wow.
And I went like, holy mackerel. I felt like he says, great. Practice that.
It was like the Mr. Miyagi thing, and wax on, wax off. Why are you making me do this? And all of a sudden, when he goes to hit him, he knows all the blocks.
It really was, you know, living in life, that kind of a mentor guidance that had nothing to do about drumming, but everything to do about drumming.
Right.
Now, what was
But you didn't question it because you knew that he had everything that you wanted to learn, and you did it, and you got immediate result.
That's a great point. I didn't question any of my teachers because, first of all, if I'm going to go to them and invest my money to them, I want to have them guide me to what got them to where they're at. What led them to where they're at? You know, Al Miller, one of my teachers here on Long Island, was a great player. When I went to him, I said, Mr. Miller, I'm yours. I'm an open book. Tell me what to do. Then I learned from Charlie Perry on Long Island and Ronnie Benedict on Long Island. Then I went to Morello. Then I went to Chapin. Then I went to Shutty Man. Then I met up with Ted Reed and Papa Joe Jones, a couple of lessons with him here in New York.
Wow.
Elvin, a lesson with Tony Williams. They were teaching, when they were in town, the Professional Percussion Center was a shop in New York that anytime a drummer would come by, they'd hang out there. Well, if they were hanging out there and you came in to buy something, the owner, Frankie Bellino, would say, hey, Dom, you want a lesson with Elvin Jones?
Wow.
I said, totally. He said, hang on a second. He said, Elvin. And Elvin would come out of the back. Here, I got another student for you. It was like, and I just sat down, and Elvin played for me for an hour, just playing ride cymbal and snare and hi-hat.
Wow.
Couple bass.
And when you were growing up in the late 60s and 70s in New York, you had all those cats playing gigs, and you had a plethora.
Oh my gosh.
A wealth of information where you could just go and see these guys play. Tony Williams, incredible.
It was drum heaven in New York. I mean, Art Blakey, I'd go to hear him all the time.
Right.
Philly Joe Jones all the time. And there were times that I went to hear Philly Joe Jones, and I didn't know it, but there was a couple other young drummers there. One of those drummers that I found out later on was Virgil Donati.
Legend.
Virgil and I were talking about this once at the same year, same club, and we were there together with Philly Joe Jones. And I didn't know Virgil at the time, and it wasn't years later till I met Virgil, and then that connection happened when he came to New York and lived in New York because he wanted to study with these guys. That's where they lived. Art Blakey would play and just drive the band. Mel Lewis with the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis big band. Louis Nelson, Buddy Richard, Buddy's play. Steve Gadd at McKell's. Oh my gosh, every Monday night we'd go to McKell's and hear Steve Gadd play. It was like eye-opening. So this was the fostering of great ideas from all these different players. Living in New York at that time, it was really absolute magic.
Fantastic. I've got a question for you that I don't know anybody else has ever asked you, but I know you've been interviewed so many times, and you're always so positive. Your enthusiasm is infectious. You're always inspiring people. And I thought to myself, I was actually just waking up and I was getting ready for the interview, and I thought to ask you this question. You're always so positive and vibrant. How do you process sadness and anger? Because you wrote a book called The Circle of Empowerment. And I know that over the years, you probably learned a lot of things from, different parts of the world and your own experiences, how to deal with that. But obviously you have those emotions. Nobody probably ever sees them. But how do you deal with sadness and anger and process those things?
Boy, in my life, I have been dragged through the coals of life. And you talk to any comedian, and their comedy usually comes from a very dark place.
Right.
And I believe positive attitude also comes from challenges in life that we realize that there are always going to be challenges. I've got to face these with the most mature attitude I can. Listen, I have in my lifetime I've lost a child. This past Sunday we just put down a dog that we had for 18 years. So there are challenges in life that happen. So, but I've got to realize how every moment is a gift and every day is a blessing. And when I wake up in the morning, if it's going to be a good day or a bad day, it's up to me to choose. That's my choice. That's not because it's raining, it's going to be a bad day. No, if it's my last day, I'm going to make it the best. So I see every day as if it's my last day, and it is a gift. And I've got to squeeze the most, just like this interview. I want to squeeze the most out of this in the time that we have together to spend time with yourself. We've only got a couple minutes left. I want to squeeze the most out of this here so we can have this kind of opportunity to create an exciting conversation that somewhere down the line, someone's listening to it and they will be inspired. I've got to make that choice on my own that I want to make it the best I can. That's up to me, and that's on my own personal ownership. And my book, The Cycle of Self-Empowerment, is about that. How to empower ourselves so I can have that feeling every day. Challenges happen. I lost my parents several years ago. They were such a positive force in my life that I surrounded myself with positive people. That's also an important tool. Surround yourself with like-minded people, people that are in your tribe, that think the way you think, and that you want to have that positive force around you. And if you surround yourself with people like that, you're going to eventually live that way every day. That's going to be a habit. And with those great habits, that will be your destiny.
Amazing. Beautiful. Thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot from that. Me included, because it's true. If you hang around with the negative Nancy and Debbie Downers and people like that, you absorb that. And if you hang out with positive, excited people that are living their life, you're going to absorb that, and that will be integrated into your life. We've got a question that came in. If you don't mind me asking, someone asked, "What advice do you have for drum teachers today?"
Great question. Boy, drum education is at a beautiful place right now because now we can educate students via this format of using Zoom. We can educate people, and I can see my students on their own drum kit, and they're also not spending time traveling to come here. So the time that they're not spending traveling to come to my studio is more time for them to practice. So as an educator today, the first thing I say is continue taking lessons. That's the first thing. Find a teacher, continue taking lessons. Secondly is research drum method books. Really get out there and research them. A book like Stick Control, go through every page of Stick Control. When I hear people say, I own the book Stick Control and I only go through the first 3 pages, that's like buying a book and only reading the first chapter. Go through the entire book. Go through every page of the book, especially the key books like Stick Control and Accents and Rebounds and Jim Chapin's Advanced Techniques for Modern Drummers and New Breed and these wonderful Master Studies 1 and 2 by Joe Morello. These are books that are core foundational books that we should know every page. So track down as many books. And now with the internet, like I said, Alfred Publications, who publishes and distributes my drum books at hudsonmusic.com that has the books digitally, there are books accessible. Just go to hudsonmusic.com and just start scrolling. You're going to find some fantastic.
Download them.
And you download it. Stick Control, it's an $11 book. Come on.
All right.
You spend $5, $10, $15, $20 for a book. That book has got knowledge from an educator, and it's just, and listen, out of all the books that I own, there have been a couple of books that, I kind of understood and didn't get that much from. But I might not have gotten a drumming idea from it, but I might have gotten an idea to spark me for me to write another drum book. So you never know what ideas will come out of all of those books. No book will be bad. Every book will spark you somehow. So for drum teachers to then go out there and open up your mind to want to learn all the different techniques, learn the techniques, understand the free stroke from George Lawrence Stone, understand Moeller's movement. Moeller's wasn't a method, it was a movement. The free stroke is a movement. The Gladstone is a movement. Those movements are all played by the greatest drummers in the world. And if they can go there and understand those movements, and also as a teacher, there's a channel called the Sessions Panel. The Sessions Panel, I interview over 300 of the top most famous musicians in the world. I tell all the teachers, go there and watch every interview. Not only the drummers, go watch Leland Sklar, bass player, Nathan East. Go watch Billy Sheehan on bass. Go watch guitar player Steve Vai's interview that I have with him. Go watch Chick Corea's interview that I have with Chick Corea. These are interviews that will inspire you not only in performing, but in education. And as a teacher, keep playing, get together with bands, play, and listen to as much music as you can all the time. All of that will keep you fired up for the rest of your life.
Dom, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you on Backstage Sessions. You've inspired me as a player and a teacher as well. I teach on creative exchange, and you've inspired me to go and delve back into those books and work hard on my technique and improve as a player and as a person. Much love to you, and we'll see you down the road.
Michael, thank you so much. Boy, thank you, Creative Exchange, for me, and what you're doing is fantastic with you performing and sharing your knowledge. It's great to see you. You are an absolute asset to the drumming world and the music world, so I thank you so much. Stay well, and I hope to see you in person at some point.
You too, brother. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye. Are we off now, or?